Here are the 4.8 day 1 notes. So this is actually using the discriminant to determine the type and the number of solutions in a quadratic equation. So tomorrow, what you're going to be relearning is the quadratic formula. You guys have seen this whenever in Algebra 1 when you're solving quadratic equations. So in this case, the discriminant is part of our quadratic formula. It is actually the b squared minus 4 times ac. Now the discriminant tells us how many solutions and the type of solutions of a quadratic equation. So meaning that when we use this, we can determine if the quadratic equation will have one real solution, will have two real solutions, or two imaginary solutions. So let's go ahead and get into that. So as I said before, discriminant is part of the quadratic formula, which you guys will see tomorrow, and is another way of solving quadratic equation. It is the b squared minus 4ac, so that's the part of it. It determines the number of solutions and the type. So what we have basically is if our discriminant is greater than 0, that means we will always get two real solutions. However, if our discriminant is less than 0, that means we get two imaginary solutions. And if our discriminant is equal to 0, that means we get one real solution. And I'll kind of talk about what that also means on the graph. So let's go ahead, we're going to do these two examples, and that's basically it. So I'm going to keep this up here so we remember if we'll have two real, two imaginary, or one real solution. Okay, we're going to do the first one together. Now, just like factoring, we want to make sure that our quadratic equation is set equal to 0. So I would make sure you write that down into your notes. So it has to be set equal to 0. This will allow us to know what is our a, our b, and our c values. So let's look at 2x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 0. Let's identify our a value. Remember, the a value is in front of the x squared term. In this case, it's 2. Now let's identify the b value. That is right in front of our x term, which in this case is 4. And then our c value is the constant, the one without a variable. In this case, it's negative 4. So make sure you really pay attention to the signs. So if there's a minus, that does indicate that that value is negative. So now we're going to use that formula, b squared minus 4ac, to determine our solutions and the type. So we take our b, which is 4, and we square that. So we have 4 squared minus 4 times our a value, which is 2 in this case, times our c value, which is negative 4. Now, what I would advise is just to plug this entire discriminant into your graphing calculator or into your scientific. It doesn't matter which one you use. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you would just plug this entire thing into your calculator. So plugging it all in actually helps a lot more because you are less likely to make mistakes. So I'm going to put 4 squared, and I'm using parentheses because I want to make sure I get into that good habit of using parentheses, especially when I square something. Then I have minus 4, right? And then using parentheses, I have times 2, and then another parentheses times a negative 4. So when I plug this whole thing in, it allows me to get the correct answer, which I get 48. So we have 48 as our discriminant. Now remember, we're always comparing our discriminant to 0. So we're seeing if 48 is greater than 0, less than 0, or equal to 0. Well, we definitely know 48 is greater than 0. Because it's greater than 0, that means we are going to get two real solutions. So if we were either factoring this quadratic equation, using completing the square, or using the quadratic formula, then we would know as our final answers, we would get two real solutions. So that would be our final answer here. So I'm going to box what our discriminant was, which was 48. And that means we got 2 real solutions. So what does that really mean if we were graphing this quadratic equation? Well, if we were graphing this, right, and I'm making a sketch. I'm not sure if this is the correct graph for this quadratic. If I was doing this and I had 2 real solutions, that means that our graph crosses the x-axis twice. And so these would be our solutions, or the x-intercepts. So whenever we get 2 real solutions, that means we get 2 x-intercepts, and that our graph crosses the x-axis. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down. So we get 2 x-intercepts, and the graph crosses the x-axis. Okay. So whenever you get 2 real solutions, that's what it basically means. Okay, let's go ahead. We're going to try the next one. So I'm going to make sure, there we go, so we can see all of these. So we're going to do the same thing for number 2. We have 4x squared plus 3x plus 12 equals 3 minus 3x. Now don't forget, you always need to make sure you set your equation equal to 0. That means that we look here that we need to move some things over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. I'm going to add 3x to also both sides so we can get this equation equal to 0. Now make sure you combine the correct terms here. So 3x will combine with our other 3x because they are like terms. And our negative 3 will combine with our 12 because those are like terms. So now rewriting this, I have 4x squared plus 6x plus 9. And that's going to be set equal to 0. Now that I have set this equal to 0, I can identify my A, B, and C values. So remember, A is the one in front of our x squared, which in this case is 4. Our B is in front of the x term, which in this case is 6. And our C value is always the constant, so the one without a variable, and that's 9 this time. So just like we did before, we're going to plug our A, B, and C values into the discriminant. So that is the B squared minus 4AC. So my B is 6, so I have 6 squared minus 4 times our A value, which is also 4, times our C value, which is 9. So just like we did before, I'm going to plug this entire thing into our calculator. So to do that, I'm going to use parentheses, 6 squared. Then I have minus 4, and then using parentheses to represent multiplication, times another 4, times 9. And we get negative 108. So that's going to be my discriminant. So I'm going to scroll down really quick so I can write that down. So my discriminant is negative 108. So that's my answer. Now we also have to determine if this is greater, less than, or equal to 0. We know since it's a negative, it's going to be less than 0. Because it's less than 0, that represents that we now have actually 2 imaginary solutions. That means we would have an I as our solution here. So we have 2 imaginary solutions. That's the type and the number, and our discriminant was negative 108. Now let's talk about what does this really mean if we were graphing this quadratic equation. Well, I'm going to scroll down really quick so we can talk about that. I'm going to leave this part here so we can talk about the discriminant and all. So if you ever get two imaginary solutions, what that represents is that our quadratic or our graph does not cross the x-axis. So really, it doesn't have any x-intercepts because it doesn't cross there. So whenever we have two imaginary solutions, meaning our discriminant is less than 0, our graph in this case does not cross the x-axis. I'm going to highlight not here, just to represent that. So does not cross x-axis. This represents that it has 0 real x-intercepts. Because really, our solutions are imaginary, so 0 real x-intercepts. Okay. So that's what's happening whenever we get two imaginary solutions. Now, all you have to do for your homework, which is on Schoology, is determine the discriminant using b squared minus 4ac, and then tell how many solutions there are, and then what type. Okay. So if you have any further questions on this, make sure you email me, or you can go down the hallways to any math teacher before or after school. And your homework is on Schoology as well.